your host, TD Flenaugh. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that some parents don't know about how to deal with, and that is perfectionism in their children. So, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to get into how there are so many drawbacks to it, and if we don't help our kids navigate this type of mindset, it could actually get them off track for success, even though they're really into learning now. You don't want to miss this episode. Stay tuned. Hit like and subscribe. Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. The gray is growing in. I don't know if I'm gonna let it go or do whatever, but right now it's growing in and we'll see how it goes. I've been having some skin issues and I'm worried about any new chemicals being introduced, and so we're letting the gray grow in a little bit. So there you have it. Let's get into some of the drawbacks of perfectionism. First of all, perfectionism has to do with fear. At its core, the fear of not being good enough, not being accepted, right? So that is at the core of what perfectionism is. As kids grow into adulthood, perfectionism can actually stop them from making their dreams come true because this fear of rejection turns into procrastination. It turns into them not being able to move forward because whatever project they're working on or whatever they want to do is not going to be good enough. It's not, it doesn't look good enough. It is not completely done. They still have to add a couple of more details to it, right? And that time stretches into years and they're not getting done or actually executing the dream and the steps and the actions that they want to take. So it is very important at an early age that we address this with our kids and help them to navigate this fear, right? Perfectionism is often put into place, it really makes kids motivated to do well and do a good job, but what really happens, and it shows a drawback, is when kids are finding something to be a challenge, right? So, as you know, a lot of kids that are perfectionists are very good at a lot of things, right? They may not have met many obstacles in their path as they're working, right? And I am a recovering perfectionist, as I've said before on this podcast. And, perfectionism really stopped me from doing things like putting out a podcast or writing a book because I just knew that it wasn't right, it wasn't good enough. And I found myself laughing at people who put out things that weren't good, and really then not going forward and moving forward on the things that I knew that I wanted to do and I knew that I could do. So I really want you to really get in ahead of it, right? And help your kids navigate this. Um, so when perfectionists find that something is difficult for them, it's hard, they're not automatically good at it. They are then making excuses why they can't do it. They are blaming others, the teacher or someone else for them not being successful. And instead of, really leaning into that with the kids, what you can do instead is really take a step back and help them to reflect on what's happening, right? Because again, the root of this attitude is a fixed mindset. So, a fixed mindset is I'm smart and I'm good at things, and that's just how it is, right? And when we run into problems, it is very easy to deflect that and blame others and really decide they're abandon whatever this activity or this project is, instead of saying that they can learn how to do it better. They could get better at it. They could sharpen this skill, right? Instead, perfectionists tend to abandon a project and then make an excuse as to why they didn't do it. And blaming others has to do with it sometimes as well. So it's very important that we think about helping our kids to navigate this because they are very smart, very intelligent, and they are really their worst enemy, meaning that their negative thoughts, their feeling inadequate, right? What perfectionism is, you're never going to be perfect. And so you are going to be really at the core feeling inadequate, feeling like you're not good enough. And being able to help them get over this is going to help them to really be successful. And then all those positives of being perfectionist, paying attention to detail, being very motivated to do well, being competitive, all those things can be a positive for them instead of a drawback or actually a setback in their life. Okay. So, the strategies that we want to work with again are thinking about that growth mindset. Number one, the growth mindset saying if we continue to work on this, that we're going to do better, that mistakes are evidence of progress and learning. And there is even brain research saying that our minds are working harder about while we are making mistakes. So mistakes is part of the learning process, and it is something that we need to embrace and that we need to think about when we're even approaching a problem. So when a kid starts a new project or some kind of new endeavor, asking them right? Before they even begin, how many times do you think you're going to have to try this before before it is successful? Like maybe how many mistakes will you make? Like unsuccessful attempts because it's going to happen, right? Now, they could get lucky and get something on the first time, but more likely they're going to be up against some type of mistake or challenge or some kind of growth gap that they need to fulfill as they are developing into this new project or role that they are undertaking. So, again, helping them to know that making mistakes is a natural part of it, and even predicting how many mistakes you might be making so that you know that this is part of the process. The other thing that we want to say as far as modeling goes is really talk about your own failures, your own mistakes. And this isn't the first time that I've said this on this podcast, but when we're thinking about perfectionists, we really need to be open with them because in their mind, they're supposed to do everything perfectly the first time, and they may be measuring according to your measuring stick, right? You may be pushing this on the child, making them feel like they're inadequate or they're not good enough. You might be comparing them to their older or younger brother or sister or something like that. We're not saying you're doing it on purpose. We know that you're a parent that is an imperfect human being. So, this is why you have to actually think about what you're doing and what you're saying to your kid. So, number one, taking a look at what they're doing and helping them to see you and your own imperfections, right? So saying, oh, I made a mistake with this. Sorry. I thought, I blamed it on dad, or I blamed it on you, or I blamed it on my boss or whoever, but I actually am the one who did this. And I am sorry. I'm apologizing for it. And then talking about how you could get better next time, right? You may be in your own competitions or doing your own types of endeavors and, like let's say you're challenging yourself to do a marathon or a 5K or something, and maybe you make a mistake and you're a lot slower than you thought you were going to be, when you set a goal, or maybe you get tired or sick or some kind of pain that prevents you from stopping that prevents you from moving on into this race. Then again, telling yourself, I did my best. These are some things I could do better next time. And in front of your kid, being human and making mistakes and being open to discussing how you're going to do better next time and how this is part of your learning journey. Right. So, really being open with your kids. Now, as a teacher, sometimes I make purposeful mistakes in front of my kids. Like I may spell a word wrong or something like that. Then I check it and I let them know it's okay to make mistakes. So you can start with made up mistakes, but you also want to be vulnerable in front of your child so they can see that you're making real mistakes and how you deal with it. And of course, You want to, be clear about not, opening up too much or things that kids shouldn't know about. But there are plenty of examples during a day or a week where you could show your own mistakes and how you're growing from those mistakes. So, very important for you to consider and think about and continue to be open in front of your child through the learning process. Very, very important. It is also important for you to understand that perfectionism could be a trauma response to feeling unsafe or not being a part of a family. Sometimes you'll find perfectionist as the stepchild or a bonus child, the way people like to call them, you'll find that they are trying to do everything right all the time. And that is because at the core, they're not sure if they're really wanted or valued. And they actually drive themselves crazy. Like I drove myself crazy with perfectionism as a high schooler. I took a bunch of AP classes, honors courses, and just was up all night, pretty much every night studying and my junior year of high school. That first semester that happened, I really had a breakdown when I got less than perfect grades, and ended up deciding to drop, all of my AP courses and honors classes because I just drove myself crazy. And I actually, just had a big breakdown. I even moved out of my house during that time. Like it could really be detrimental. Like, luckily, I kept things together. I went to college and still got my earned my degree and everything like that. But I did really have um a breakup with my parents, right? We were estranged for a while, and I even moved out of state, out of Alaska. So all of this came, after my breakdown of being a perfectionist for so many years. So it is important for you to get a handle on this early on for your kids because you don't know where it could lead. Some perfectionists even, die by suicide. It's just too much for them to deal with. It is unattainable, right? So at its core, and I keep saying at its core, um, kids need to know that they are loved no matter who they are or what they are, that they're loved, not because they got A's, not because they won the spelling bee, just because they are who they are. 75% of children don't know how to write well. Add that to the fact that so many people out there are trying to silence the voices of those who have been oppressed and trying to prevent them from telling their story. Who's going to tell your story? If your child doesn't know how to write well, I have two books to address this issue: The Rewrite Method and The Rewrite Method Workbook, written to make sure that parents know what to do, that educators know what to do to get their children to write better, and just not write better, but love to write. Make sure that your next generation could tell their story and they won't be silenced. Go to fallingforlearning.com today to purchase your set. It is so important that we get to the root cause of the perfectionism. Is the perfectionism from trauma? Is it because we are the ones who have this really high standard for them and we're not letting them know that we love them even if it's not perfect? Um, what is happening with our kids, right? We need to build up their self-esteem so that they know that they are enough without being perfect. Because again, no one is perfect and that's an unattainable goal. So really being clear with them about what you want them to do and what you know they're capable of doing, but letting them know that making mistakes is part of the journey. If we don't get to the root causes of why they have perfectionism, again, it could cause a mental type of breakdown or something for our kids, or even worse. And so it is so important that we learn that. And obviously, because children are always trying to be perfect and reach unattainable goals, they're not going to be happy. They're going to be very unhappy, right? And really, self worth and happiness does not come from being perfect, it comes from progress, being resilient, Like keep working even when things don't go perfect and learning how to conquer fears and to face challenges. And not because you're perfect, but because you believe in your ability to be strong and to create a new story even when you have setbacks. Really important to think about, how we're modeling for our kids a reaction to a negative outcome or a mistake, right? So if they make a mistake and we're really hard on them, then of course that reinforces the need for perfectionism. If they are making mistakes and then we are showing that there's grace there